Good afternoon. I'm Sukky Choongh, the Environment Manager at the Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders. A little bit of background about who we are. So we're the trade association representing the UK automotive industry. Our members are about 900 strong, and they include vehicle manufacturers, the wider supply chain, digital tech companies, charge point providers, etc. We contribute £67 billion to the UK economy in 2021, and we employ 800,000 people across the UK in automotive. We have in the region of 40.5 million vehicles on the road today, with 35 million of those being cars. It is recognised that the transition to decarbonisation and achieving the government's ambitions for net zero will require a reduction in the number of cars on the road. And we see with new innovations and technologies such as connected autonomous vehicles and shared mobility being a substantial contributor to that reduction in the number of vehicles on the road. The number of trucks and buses on the road generally don't change. They are purchased for very different reasons than for cars. They're assets used for commercial purposes, and it doesn't really fluctuate too much. Vans, however, the number of van registrations are increasing, and this is mainly because of our lifestyle, how we're choosing to live our life and purchase goods and services. So whilst many of us choose not to own a car of our own and use public transport and take shared mobility, for example, we do often click very easily when we're shopping online. And I think the thing to consider is every time we're putting something in our online basket, that is generating a vehicle movement as well. So in turn, that has led to a new economy where people are purchasing more vans to be able to conduct deliveries. Vehicle market at the moment has it's kind of recovering after a couple of very turbulent years because of COVID. Additionally, shortages in the supply chain caused by the war in Ukraine and shortages in semiconductors have really had an impact. But we are thriving now, and I think if we look at car registrations to begin with, we publish our registrations every month. The data comes from vehicles that are purchased and put directly onto the MIVRIS database, which is the Motor Vehicle Registration Information System, and then we simply churn that data out into a readable form. So February registrations saw an increase of 26.2% compared with this time last year for all vehicles, regardless of their powertrain. The battery electric vehicle market is always the one to watch, which has gone up 18.2%, giving us a market share of 16.5% now. If you look at these figures, however, you'll see battery electric vehicles registered in February at 12,310. So that's still just a fraction of the petrol cars registered at 32,311. So petrol is still the powertrain of choice for the UK consumer. Van registrations again up by 8.5% compared to last year. Again, the battery electric van market is growing to the point of 5.5% market share in February 2023. Showing full year data for HGVs and bus and coach. So HGVs, normally we register around 50,000 trucks every month. This is gone down quite significantly. Sorry, 50,000 every year, that is. So we're still seeing a reduction of 9.6%. Again, that's a bit of a COVID impact and a hangover there. And the risk of not registering enough new vehicles is basically that older vehicles will stay on the road for longer, not only not being able to take advantage of new emissions, but also safety standards that have improved as vehicles change and progress to newer standards. They're not being fully recognised on the road whilst the market is slow. Bus and coach registrations, unfortunately, have fallen. And again, much of this is about an operator's ability to purchase new vehicles. There was significant amounts of money promised by the UK government for bus improvement. There was a commitment for 4,000 new zero-emission buses within the current Conservative Parliament. We've seen 1,400 at the moment, so we do ask the government consistently to put that funding out there so bus operators can buy the newest, cleanest vehicles for people to be able to travel on. There are a number of policies in pipeline for which the automotive industry does have to comply with. Everybody has, all sectors, including aviation, maritime and rail, have commitments to meet net zero. The ones for the automotive sector are by far the most stringent, and the ones that are going to be coming first. So there's a commitment to end the sale of all new petrol and diesel cars and vans by 2030, with all cars and vans being significantly emission-free by 2035. We will expect to phase out non-zero emission buses and coaches at some point between 2025 and 2032. And also we're expecting a zero emission vehicle mandate, which is a requirement for manufacturers to sell a certain percentage of zero emission vehicles, and that will begin in 2024. Additionally, we have an end of sale date for heavy goods vehicles at 2035 up to 26 tonnes and 2040 for over 26 tonnes. The industry has responded with products that are available. There are over 150 vehicles on the market today that have a plug that can operate in zero emission at some time. And that's not just cars, it's also vans, trucks, buses and minibuses as well. So there's been significant investment in this area, both in the UK and overseas. None of this works, however, without infrastructure. And the main barrier for consumers, whether they be commercial consumers or private, is a lack of infrastructure to have that reliability of being able to use their vehicle as it's intended. So we published our 7-point plan for electric vehicle charging infrastructure back in March 2022. And what we ask for in this plan is that the consumer is at the centre of all infrastructure policy and planning. There's a divergence at the moment with the early adopters of electric vehicles being those that have off-street parking and have the ability to charge at home. If we're going to make this transition to zero emissions one that's socially equitable for all, then that charging infrastructure needs to be made available on street at public charging stations as well. Additionally, the cost of charging it is very different whether you're charging in public or at home. And firstly, you pay 20% VAT if you're charging in public, and you only pay 5% if you're charging at home. So often that does lead to people that already don't have a home with a driveway potentially being worse off financially than those that do, but then still having to pay more for the same service, which we think is incredibly unfair. We'd like government to deliver a national plan to provide consumers with the right number of chargers in the right places and establish a right to charge for all. So even if you rent your property, own your property, or have a commercial premises where you need to put vans or cars, etc., then there shouldn't be anything to stop you from putting in charging infrastructure. We have a requirement and a legally binding target for ending the sale of non-zero emission vehicles. We'd like to see that same thing applied to the charging infrastructure industry as well. The charging infrastructure availability in the UK does need to move alongside at the same rate as vehicle uptake. To ensure that consumers are getting a fair and equitable service, then we'd like to see a regulator put in place, potentially called off-charge, just a suggestion, doesn't have to be that. But again, there must be somewhere for consumers to go if anything should go wrong. And we'd like to see ring-fence funding for local authorities. At the moment, local authorities have all of the responsibility for putting local charging infrastructure in, which, you know, seems a little bit odd if you don't ask the local authority to put in a petrol station, but here we are needing them to put charge points in. And I think with the pressures on local authorities in terms of funding, technical expertise and having staff available to do this, there does need to be far more support, not just in terms of funding, but also technical expertise and support as well. And then the electricity system overall needs to be green. We cannot be putting brown energy into green cars. You know, we've developed technology that will provide zero emissions, and the energy that goes into providing energy for those cars needs to also be as green as possible. Overall, we believe that the quickest way to improve air quality is through fleet renewal. This has been proven time and time again. Clean air zones across the UK and the central London ULEZ have shown air quality improvements due to fleet renewal. The graph that you see is from Leeds. So Leeds was one of the first cities that was supposed to adopt a clean air zone back under the government's plan for reducing NO2 at roadside locations, published in 2017. What Leeds did is they got some early funding and supported fleet operators to change the van fleet. And then once they did that, emissions came down and found that they weren't going to increase again. So therefore, there was no need to have a clean air zone in place. If we're putting in clean air zones just to charge people, then nobody wins, because everybody's out of pocket because they can't afford to purchase a new vehicle, and air quality is still bad. So we do believe that strategic measures and a targeted focus on helping people to change their vehicles is actually the quickest way and the most guaranteed way to improve air quality. And locally, we've seen that on Putney High Street as well, when the buses changed to hybrid and then eventually to zero emission, NO2 reductions came down, quite significantly. So we've seen that in place locally. I'm sorry I couldn't be there with you in person today, but please do forward any questions and I'll be happy to take them on. Thank you very much for your time.